What's up, everyone? This is Cortland from indiehackers.com, and you are watching Indie Hackers Office Hours, where we get experts like Alex today to come on and help founders from all over the world work on their startups. Alex, how's it going?
Good, man. How's it going?
Pretty good. Why don't you introduce yourself so we know who you are?
Okay, so my name's Alex McClafferty. I was a co-founder of a company called WP Curve. WP Curve was 24/7 WordPress support. So we built a remote team of around 30 people over the course of 3 years and bootstrapped it to 7 figures. In 2016, we ended up selling the company to GoDaddy, and I stayed on there for 2 years to scale the business out within the GoDaddy machine. 2018, towards the end of 2018, I ended up jumping into coaching entrepreneurs full time. So I now coach, and you can find my website at productize.co. And I work with SaaS founders and also work with folks who are doing productized services. So as I was saying before, I'm a bit of a full stack entrepreneur. I'm not really a specialist in any one thing, but I'm happy to, field any questions that some of the fine folks on this call might have.
Well, I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. Our first guest is Dragos. Dragos, I'm going to promote you to a panelist. So in another second, you should be up here with the rest of us asking questions. Let's see if we can get Dragos in here. Dragos, can you hear us? You might be muted. I can't hear you. Can you hear him, Alex?
No.
Okay, we can't hear you. You're muted. You can do sign language. Okay, here's what we'll do. Dragos, you try to figure out your mic issue. I'm going to invite Ajit up here to talk.
Dragos, maybe rejoin. He can't hear us. Maybe put that in the chat for him to rejoin.
I think he can hear us. Oh, he can. I see.
Now, okay. So hi, guys. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, you made it.
Hours. Yeah. Okay. I'm Dragos. I'm from Romania. I'm an Android developer. 10 months ago, I started NetCrumb. Me and Alex already had some replies on Indie Hackers. So NetCrumb is a web app that helps people build WordPress websites faster and easier. I've hired an agency to build my app 10 months ago. They promised me to launch it in 3 months. It took them like 7 months. And 10 months later, after around 2,000 visitors, I only got 1 customer. So yeah, the problem I'm struggling with right now is finding customers, and I already told Alex that I think the issue I have is actually finding my niche and starting from there rather than going everywhere as I started.
Okay, so Dragos, thanks for the summary and congratulations on launching and getting something out into market. A few people do that, so I wouldn't be too hard on yourself about having 1 customer from 2,000 visitors. I think in the post I mentioned that depending on the type of traffic and the type of people that you're attracting, I probably wouldn't put too much weight on that to start. But what I do want to understand, and I haven't read any new replies that you've had to that post or that post reply I had, is what have you done in terms of customer development? So have you spent time interviewing potential customers? Have you got out and bought folks coffee? Do you understand what problem you're solving for them? Or and you can lay it on me if you want, did you build this app to solve your own problem and then maybe try and push it out to a market that didn't know they had that problem or didn't feel the pain of that problem? Like where are you at on that front?
Okay, so the idea of the app started after I built a few websites, WordPress websites myself. And every time I was building a website, it took me like 3 or 4 hours just to find a team and work with that builder. And I really thought that the process could be improved. So I thought for a few months, asked people around, but mostly from Facebook groups or people I knew. What do they think about the issue, or do they have this problem? And most of them at first. I didn't understand what I'm trying to do. And so in terms of talking with people, I mean, I spoke with people. The problem is I never knew exactly like what people shall I speak with.
Mm-hmm.
So I spoke with them, but to be honest, I don't know exactly like were they an agency, what they were doing exactly in their life. I knew they were like developers, like a broad category. And to promote my app, I wrote a blog series, a 4-part blog series during the development of the app. And I gathered like 200 emails on my list. And and I launched it on Product Hunt, and then like tried to send a sequence of emails to people. And I didn't. And then I promoted, I think, in a few Facebook groups as well.
Okay. Was the email series or the blog post series more about your journey as an entrepreneur and building the app, or was it more technical? Like, what was
it was more like the journey, like what are the ups and downs of building, and like I explained also the how much it costed me, and like how it went from 3 months to almost 7 months, and stuff like that. And what's the app about? What's gonna solve, and what issues people gonna solve by using it.
Okay, so what I can take away from that is that you probably, without knowing it, probably created an audience of folks that are just like yourself, which are people that are interested in building a business or might be looking for some inspiration to start on their own thing. And I did the same thing myself, which was to look at different resources to try and, follow and understand what folks were doing when they were trying to start their business. And I would be very surprised if you had any like really qualified, interested parties who would actually buy your product or service. Rather, they were probably just interested in you and your story. And so this is not a bad thing. This is just something to be aware of. And I see this quite a bit, and it often distracts folks when they're trying to build a product or a company, which is you get very caught up in all of your story and what you're doing and how you're feeling versus thinking about the problem that you're solving for the audience that needs help. So for example, if you were to do a blog series on, a day in the life of a freelancer or a day in the life of a web agency, and understand, their pain points and put together some solutions for them, then I would expect you would get a lot more qualified traffic, and you at least get some like use the baseball terminology, even though I'm Australian, like at bats, which means that you'd get the opportunity to actually talk to people that have a problem that you can actually solve. So does that make sense? Like there's a good, I can't be absolute about this, but there's a good likelihood that there's a good likelihood that you found people that are just like you, which again, it's not a bad thing. It just is, but you get to make a decision now as to whether, you've invested a bunch of time and a bunch of money and a bunch of effort into building this thing. Now, do you want to, continue to invest in it and go out and do the harder work, which is to talk to the folks that I would recommend talking to are freelancers, folks like yourself, or developers, or people that need to create a significant volume of WordPress sites, and understand, hey, if you had this tool, what would be different? Like you may not, like you might have personally have a very unique workflow, and it might not solve a problem for anyone else. Or you might have a very like common workflow, and people have just been like needing this solution but haven't known about it. But you're not going to know, you're not going to get an answer to that until you get out and actually set up some calls with folks that are, similar to you, not in the sense of wanting to be an entrepreneur, but similar to you in the sense of building a bunch of WordPress websites and dealing with the pain of having to stand those up and, get the themes going and everything else. Does that land for you? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So like, how do you find those people? Like, how do you know exactly on which people to focus? And
it's good old fashioned. If you've ever seen like a big old phone book, this is how they used to do it back in the day, which is kind of cold calling. You can do like I guess a bit of a warm email, jump on LinkedIn, look at folks that are, like a WordPress developer or run an agency, and you can put some search queries in there, reach out to them, connect to them, and say, hey, I'm interested in this space. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just like looking for 30 minutes of your time to talk about an idea and a product that I'm working through. And you seem like someone that would benefit from it. Would you be interested in, giving me 30 minutes of your time? And by the way, I'm happy to pay for that time if you need me to. That's something that I've used before, which is to actually get people on calls, you have to respect their time and not make it all about you. And you offer to compensate them. And people will not ask for money. I've never had anyone ask for money, but you make sure that their time is respected and you ask them thoughtfully, hey, I'm not trying to sell you anything, but I want to talk to you about this problem that I'm solving to see if it is a problem for you and, get your input on what the products could look like. And I did that when I think it was in 2015, when I was interested in getting into the space of customer success. And I ended up, I was either looking to build a product in the space or get into consulting or build some kind of business within the space. And ultimately I ended up meeting with probably about 20 people, either by phone or face-to-face, and made a great network. It's just a great networking kind of effort. But, I could sit there in my head and think, okay, what's happening in customer success? What does the future hold for the category? What are the cool products? Who's making moves? What's going on? Or just go out and meet folks and open up and get to talk to them. And I've seen that work enough times to say that it's a pretty simple step to, get people on the line and learn more from them.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thanks, Alex. Yeah.
No worries. And by the way, I linked to a customer development slide share in that response. And Jason Evanish, who's a guy that I've known for
I saw it.
Yeah, he's written a lot about customer development, so it's a great place to start.
Yeah, if you have any books on customer development, stuff like that, I love to read them.
I would keep it really lean. You don't need to go too deep on it. Just have maybe 5 or 7 questions that you're going to ask. And the more important thing is just getting in front of people and talking to them, and then the conversation will flow and you'll learn from that.
Yeah, thanks, Alex.
Cool.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next guest. His name is David. His Indie Hackers username is Kolaba. That was exactly 10 minutes. Dragos, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story. David, can you hear us? Can you try saying something and maybe introduce yourself?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we got you.
Yes, fantastic. It dropped out there for a second. Yeah, thanks, Colin. This is really great concepts. Really appreciate your time, and you too, Alex. Really appreciate it. Do you want me to just dive into my question?
Yeah, just let us know what you're working on and what questions you have.
Cool. So for me at the moment, I'm kind of getting a little bit meta, if you like, really. So in 2016, I launched a product which was really hyper niche to a particular market here in the UK. It's a market that I worked in previously, so I thought it'd be a really interesting product. And 3 years in now, and it roughly does about 1k, British pounds a month. So it's nothing to be sniffed at, but it is pretty micro company, and I've taken the decision that it's not really worth my time to continue working on it. And really, I think I kind of learned a lesson in terms of targeting bigger markets, but I'm just really interested in trying to understand from you guys, how you find interesting problems. For me, it's generally industries that I've worked in, but is there a better way? Is there a way to find better and bigger problems to solve?
Shall I take that? Or Cortland, do you have anything to add? I know you're chomping at the bit.
I haven't spent a ton of time just finding ideas. I've only worked on maybe 4 or 5 ideas in my life. But there are a lot of different ways you can go about it. I think, it really depends on your goals. What is your primary goal as an indie hacker?
So, I mean, really, where I want to be eventually is running a small team of developers and just creating applications, cool applications that solve sort of real world problems. So at the moment I'm working on kind of a tool to help companies communicate better with their clients and create like a friendly and positive image, like for companies that do installations, and to better manage that through, you know, using the Directions API with Google and stuff. It's just creating kind of like cool business applications, pretty much. So running a small team here in the UK.
Okay, and let me ask you one follow-up question, which is like, what is your main worry? Is there a concern you have about a weakness or a stumbling block that you've hit in the past? Or is it more so that you feel confident about everything and you just want interesting ideas that you think can work?
I think in terms of worry, I think every indie hacker kind of, you know, initially is just like a massive burst of enthusiasm. And then when you kind of come across a failure, it's like, uh-oh, you know, am I capable of this? So the worry is, you know, can I actually do this? That's like a fundamental thing. So yeah, I think it's just kind of marrying that together. So it's understanding a problem, and then being able to create something that really solves a problem and really resonates with people. So that's kind of the worry there.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So I don't have any sort of like lightning in a bottle like solution for coming up with an idea that's going to alleviate worry and allow you to work with a small team. However, I do know that there's several mistakes that a lot of people make that you can sort of pay attention to in advance and sort of structure your strategy around avoiding those mistakes and doing things that are more likely to succeed. One thing that I find helps a lot is to know pretty quickly whether or not you're onto something. Like, you don't necessarily want to struggle for 6 months working on an idea that you have no idea if it actually has legs. And there is an entire class of ideas where you essentially don't have to spend that amount of time before you can really reach out to customers and say, hey, you know, we're offering this service. Is this something that you would pay for? And I like to sort of find those ideas by looking at the existing market and seeing where money is changing hands. Like, what problems are companies already profitably solving? However, they're not in some sort of winner-take-all market where it's going to be impossible for you to break in and provide some sort of service. So, for example, my good friend, we just recorded a podcast last week. She's going to be on the show this Thursday, but she's working on a website called Key Values. And on her website, she's essentially helping companies, tech companies, hire startup engineering talent. Now, this is not like some brand new problem the world has never seen before and she's the only person solving this problem. This is a problem you can look out in the world and see there's tons of recruiting companies and job boards and specialty websites that help programmers, you know, get interviews with various companies. There's hundreds of different ways to solve this problem, which is what makes it attractive. It's lucrative. Companies pay a lot of money for it. There's not just one way to solve it, etc. And so she sort of stumbled on that opportunity by, like, number one, looking at her own problems, but number two, sort of filtering her own problems and seeing, you know, not what is unique and what is nobody else doing, but which of my problems are there lots of potential solutions for that no one really sort of takes the entire market by themselves. Okay, let me filter to the ones that I know the best and the most comfortable with, and then come up with my own, like, unique solution for that. So I think, you know, there's a lot of wisdom in the phrase solve your own problems. You can't take it too far because, like Alex was mentioning earlier, it might be the case that not everybody is exactly like you. You need to do some market research. But I think where people get tripped up often is they see a problem that they have and others are already solving it. So they conclude, oh, I can't possibly solve it. But a huge variety of problems have, like, myriad solutions, and you don't necessarily have to solve it in the same way as others. So I would say that's a good place to start, something where you know people are willing to pay for it, because then you can immediately go to customers and propose your solution and see if they're interested, see if they'll do a pre-order, see if they will be interested in what you're building. And, you know, you could even whip out a prototype in, you know, hopefully not that long, and actually try to charge customers, as opposed to trying to discover some sort of brand new problem that no one's ever solved and you haven't proven the market and you're not sure if companies will pay for it. That's a little riskier and harder, and you end up having a longer feedback loop cycle as a founder before you sort of get this first win. So that would be my advice. Look at what people are already doing. And there's a ton of stuff that people are already doing, making a lot of money from, that could be an interesting problem for you to solve.
And I want to jump in on the back of what Cortland was saying, which is a couple of things that I look at is customer support forums for different products. That's like an absolute gold mine to understand, like, pains that people are having with specific products, but also overall. So you can just, like, troll forums to look at problems that customers are having. I was speaking to a guy the other day. He runs a really successful service, which is converting people from drip to ConvertKit and then ConvertKit to drip. Like, that's just a business process that people need help with that happens all the time. So migration service. Another one is like doing like a WP curve style model for Salesforce. So Salesforce is this big clunky, you know, beast of an application that always has problems and is always breaking and is business critical as well. And companies pay, hundreds of thousands of dollars for subscriptions to that product, but also like tens of thousands of dollars for administrators and, people that are in operations fixing these problems. And that's, you kind of follow the money on that. So I think, to reiterate what Cortland is saying, like looking at where that money is changing hands is gold. Like for me with WP Curve, I went through the pain of dealing with a WordPress problem. I was so upset after I had that problem that I was like, I'm pissed off right now, and this is frustrating. And I figured there would be at least another 1,000 people that were, I'm not a technical expert, but I'm know enough to be dangerous. And when I sat with that and I was like, it doesn't have to be this hard. I would pay to have someone, take this pain away from me, that I knew there was something there. So, also, looking at some of your own problems is a good jump off point as well.
I want to add to that too. We're just piling on here. I really like what Alex said. There's a lot of companies on Indie Hackers that have done exactly what he said. Zapier is a really good example. They would just go to these customer support forums and they would see, a lot of customers want to connect this product to another product. Let's build an integration for that. And that also served as their distribution channel, because then they go back to those customers and say, hey, you've asked this question. We can sort of be the answer to that question. Check out our product. And the companies that they were sort of on the support forums for loved them, because now those companies were like, hey, you're helping our customers with these problems. Now we don't have to help our customers with these problems. So they would start redirecting people to Zapier. With Indie Hackers, I did something sort of similar, which is I sort of started as a distribution channel. So I went to Hacker News and I was like, this is a huge distribution channel. If you post to Hacker News, you can get a ton of traffic. So if I could build something that people here like and repeatedly sort of get it on the front page, then at least I've got that part of my business squared away. And then participating in the forum constantly sort of gave me an idea of what people actually would like. And so I think going to support forums is highly underrated, especially if it's a support forum or maybe even just like a casual forum where people are sort of gathering en masse enough numbers that you can use them not only to figure out what I need to work on, but also to advertise to them and sort of market to them once you've built your thing.
I remember those days. I used to see those posts and I'd look for the $sign because it was always like so-and-so has reached like X number of dollars per month. And that stuff on Hacker News is gold because that's what a lot of the hackers are looking for. So Cortland, hats off to you, man. You nailed that channel.
We're on Hacker News today. We moved to page 2 right now, but we were on the top number 2 earlier this morning.
Did you have more questions, David?
No, that's well. I mean, I could ask you questions all day, but let's keep it really neat sort of time.
Give us another one.
Oh, really? Oh, cool. Okay, so another thing that I'm thinking about at the moment is I've got this other sort of like hacker kind of mentality of kind of being in a cave working on a product and kind of coming up for air sort of 3 months later and saying, hey guys, check this out. How important is kind of like speaking to people, not necessarily like potential customers, but just speaking to people like in your local area, sort of like local sort of tech movements, meeting people online. Again, a little bit meta, but I'm just curious about your guys' sort of understanding of how important that is, or is it something that is potentially distracting and you should just get on with what you're doing and develop product?
I'll take that one first and maybe Cortland can go second. I think if you have an intention or there's a purpose behind those conversations, then it's a really good thing. My intention and purpose behind a lot of the connections that I made was to be helpful to people without expecting anything in return. And that would be because I had the time or the ability to do that. So when I was a couple of years into WP Curve, I had founders, Australian founders specifically, reaching out to me to have coffee and hang out and bounce ideas off me. And a couple of those people today now run companies that are worth millions or tens of millions of dollars, and I was one of the people that helped nudge them along the way. And so what that meant to me is that I didn't realize it, but I've got a couple of folks out there who are big advocates of the work that I do because I was available to them to be helpful to them. What I would say is to be careful not to mix that up with productive work if you're just going along to get some kind of like entrepreneurial dopamine hit, which is a bit of a common thing. You get a bit of a contact fire when you go to a meetup. Someone tells this story of how magical their journey's been, and then you're like, wow, like maybe I could do that, and then you fall off the edge of that as the night finishes. So just understanding what the purpose is behind making those connections, I think is super important.
I second that. I think it's networking sometimes gets a bad rap, where it's like a lot of people just talking about nothing and nothing comes of those conversations. And not that like 100% of every conversation you have with someone has to be ultimately productive, But if you have like an actual goal and reason you're talking to people, it's much easier to sort of extract something from that conversation. And I think it's underrated sometimes just to tell people what it is that you're working on and what your goals are, because oftentimes people are just nice. They want to help you, but they don't know how to just guess how to help you. And so if you're constantly sort of putting it out there, what am I working on? Here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to come up with an idea. I'm trying to hire this person. I'm trying to figure out this marketing channel. And you put that out there, whether it's on Twitter or in person or in video calls, people might, know the answer to your particular question. The last thing I will say in that note is it helps to be doing something kind of cool. People are also sort of trying to filter, because a lot of people don't really want to have pointless conversations. And so if you are sort of proving that you're like in it for real, like if you are building an app and you've made some progress, you put it online, you've tried getting it out there, and then you email somebody asking for help with that particular issue or what you're working on, they're exponentially more likely to help you than most of the other emails they get, which are from people who are like, oh, I've got an idea and I'm kind of sort of thinking about it, but I'm not sure. This is something that I've never really been that good at. I've always been solitary, like lock myself in my room, just try to do everything by myself. But I've met a lot of people who are extraordinarily good at it and just been impressed time after time with some of the things that they can accomplish by just getting help from others. And they got that help by just constantly saying what they're working on and reaching out and actually doing things. So I think it's underrated if you do it the right way.
Cool. Yeah, I really appreciate that. So it sounds like, yes, it's good, but if you have a clear intention in mind rather than just doing it for its own sake. So yeah, really helpful. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks so much. So we're going to bring
thanks,
on...
David.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you both.
Cool. So we are going to bring on Evan next.
Yo.
How's it going, Evan? Oh, whoops. I kicked Evan out and I left David here. Sorry. Let's switch it back. All right. Sorry about that, Evan. How's it going?
Hey, good. How you doing?
Pretty good. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about what you're working on and ask Alex how we can help you.
Cool. So my name's Evan. My co-founders, Femi and Caleb, are around here somewhere. We're working on ScholarMe. So we're a single tool to apply for student loans, government aid, and scholarships. So we sort of have like a single data set that you fill out, and that's like all the information required to apply for loans, government aid, and scholarships, and then we automate those applications for you. So we're kind of like a one-stop shop for doing all of your applications for financial aid.
Okay.
So a big thing that's come up is, so we're working on this full time, and I think that we're really still trying to nail down, which is more of like an operations thing, is like figuring out how to do accountability really well. So we have three of us. We have like these three core products between like the loans and the scholarships and the government aid. So there's always a million tasks. And so figuring out like how to keep each other accountable, how strict we want to be, how we should think about things slipping and getting prioritized poorly is sort of like classic startup woes, but it's something that we really think we can improve on a lot. And be interesting to hear about how both you guys like think about those things.
Cool. I'll jump in. So tell me, you're in the startup phase. How old is the company?
About a year now. So we launched, I think 6 or 7 months ago. We've been growing about 100% month over month. Each of those months, we have about just over 36,000 students signed up.
Awesome. Well done. Well done. Yeah. So one of the challenges is focus. Like entrepreneurs struggle with shiny object syndrome, and you'll typically find yourself working on the stuff that you enjoy versus the stuff that needs to get done. I was working with an entrepreneur last week in Augusta in Georgia. And the way that I break this down for him is you can choose to eat your vegetables or choose to eat your dessert. And if you're an entrepreneur, you're just happy to eat your dessert all day long. That's because it tastes good, makes you feel good, and it's much nicer than eating your vegetables. So when it comes to motivation and getting people on track and making sure that you're hitting the goals and the KPIs that you need to hit, as a co-founding group, I would suggest that you sit down and understand like what it is that you're working towards just in the year of 2019. Say, hey, this is the outcome that we want to get to, whether that is a revenue number or a number of users or a number of transactions, whatever that metric is, like a single metric. I think at 500 startups, they call it the one metric that matters. And the reason that they do that is because it really narrows the focus of the founders. Once you've kind of agreed on what that high level metric is, then you can figure out what work goes in behind that to support your ability to, achieve that metric. So if it's a revenue number, it's like, okay, someone's got to be on the front of sales or on the front of growth or on the front of marketing, whatever it needs to be. But there's a way to draw a line of clarity from the work that you put in to the outcome that you expect. And then you need some kind of mechanism to make sure that things are tracking as they should be tracking. The reason that having a mechanism is important is because if you just say, oh yeah, I did some work on this, I'm feeling okay about it, there's nothing to really keep you accountable to. And you also can't lean on other people to keep you accountable because you kind of want to have that accountability built into, your own, working style. So by creating a metric or a number that you keep yourself individually accountable to, then you can know, hey, I'm on track or I'm not on track. And this is something that commonly happens within co-founder relationships, which is you've got one co-founder who's responsible for one thing, another co-founder who's responsible for another. And it's hard to understand what impact they're making to the business. And then that creates friction within the relationship. So the reason I recommend you guys get all together and understand what it is you're working towards and be agreed upon that, and then break that down into, the specific work areas and the individual KPIs to measure that, is you take that off the table. It drives clarity. And the discussions that you have are going to be less around what's happened and more about the problems that you're having achieving your individual and respective targets. Does that land for you? Does that make sense to you so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we do well is set high level goals. So setting yearly, quarterly, monthly goals. I think we actually do well, and we talk about these a lot, and we're reasonably aligned. The tricky part is goals are always audacious. There's a million things to do. There's so many more problems that come up than we originally anticipate, and so a lot of times we'll miss goals. And so the question is how do we think about when things go badly? How should we course correct? So when multiple goals get missed, is it just run a bunch of retros? It's really how do we get back on track super quickly and actually learn from mistakes effectively, do you think?
Do you have an example of a goal that was recently missed?
It could be anything between just a product deadline. For example, so I write code on the team, and we wanted to ship a massive feature, and it took 2 weeks longer than I originally anticipated. So that's sort of one thing. But then there's also I'm probably working 8 hours a day, but I could probably be working 12. And so question is do we just say, okay, Evan just needs to be working more hours? Or,
no, you don't. You don't.
Breaking down, are we just bad at estimation? Because this has happened a fair amount of times. How should we really be thinking about that in terms of?
Every engineer I've ever met is horrendous at estimations. That's a given. And Cortland's smiling because he knows it's true. Hand up if you're bad at estimating.
It's hard. It's hard to estimate engineering tasks.
Yeah. So you can look at different ways to frame up what the goal is as well, because there is, there's the product that you're building and the feature set that you're building, but there's also the business metrics that drive it. So instead of, being wholly and solely focused on getting a feature out the door, it's okay, what cadence do we want to hit? And what contribution are we going to be happy with as we push it out? So different ways to frame this up are, instead of getting stuck on this huge chunky feature, it's the goal is to release on this date. So that forces us to be ready to release something on this date. And that's a natural kind of, constraint that makes you narrow in and go, what can I actually ship? And so I worked with a guy on this who has a team of, I think he's got maybe 10 or a dozen engineers, and working to a time-based rather than a feature-based launch schedule made them narrow their focus, because they're okay, we have to get stuff out. And if we're going to do a monthly or a quarterly release, then it forces us in planning to break things down in such into small enough chunks that we can feel good about what we're pushing out. Because you're going to work, you're going to work your butt off anyway. So you're not sitting around on Facebook and chilling out. You're actually cutting code. And that way you take the pressure off, the feeling shitty about the delivery, but you feel really good about the fact that, hey, every month we're dropping code, or every 2 weeks we're dropping something, and it's broken down into small enough pieces that it still creates value for our customers and it pushes us towards our overall goal. Cortland, you are an engineer, my man, so you've probably got a good point of view on this as well.
Yeah, I got a lot of...
Just for a quick, little bit more context, we're we're probably, our development cycle is like a day and a half. So like we're probably, yeah, like because again, like it's just me, we have like basically no development overhead. So the second that something works, I merge it to master and deploy it. So it is like, we're really just like on like that, like the cowboy plan. We'll just ship.
I'm in the same boat. I ship code every day for indie hackers whenever I'm not working on the podcast. I got a lot to say on this. I have a lot of the same experiences that you do. So it's my brother in the background walking around. So number one, I think you need to evaluate, and Alex touched on this a bit, sort of evaluate whether or not you're setting goals correctly. And so like if you are overshooting how long it takes you to get things done, that's something that you should deliberately go back and evaluate why that happened. And this is not going to be something that you fix today. It's not going to be something that you fix tomorrow, but it's something that I like to do, which is to sit down and just like take an hour every week and say, what kind of mistakes did I make in the recent past? Why did I make those mistakes? How might I be making that exact mistake right now? And what can I do to stop making that mistake? And it sounds a little airy-fairy, but if you do that consistently over time, you sort of permanently set a baseline for yourself where you can kind of guarantee that you'll improve over time as a founder. Like you don't have to worry in the long term whether or not you're going to keep making the same mistakes because you're ruthlessly identifying why you're making that mistake. So I think that's a good habit to get in the habit of. Number two, I would be aware of sort of extrinsic versus intrinsic motivations. So like personally, I'm much more driven by extrinsic motivations. If I have a deadline to hit that's going to let down other people, if I have a boss expecting me to get something done, if I have someone expecting me to show up for a meeting, like I get that thing done. I just do. Whether it sucks for me or I hate it or I'd rather do all these other things that are more fun to me, I might procrastinate to the last minute, but I will eventually get that thing done. And so I sort of structure this in a way to force myself to get things done. So the example I always like to give is in the beginning of Indie Hackers, I had a weekly newsletter. And every newsletter, I would commit very publicly to getting this thing done by the next weekly newsletter. And I hated my life for like 2 or 3 months because every Wednesday night I hadn't gotten those things done. And I was like, damn, I got to do it. And I would stay up all night because like that's just what drives me. And I think there are lots of things that I intrinsically love doing. Like I love writing code. I love doing all sorts of things that aren't necessarily the most important. But the only way to sort of pull myself away from those sometimes and do the things that I need to do, like Alex was saying, eating my vegetables, is if I feel like I'll be letting somebody down or embarrassing myself by not doing that. And so if you have something that like motivates you in that way, I would go for that. And the last thing I will say is sometimes like some battles aren't worth fighting. Like you just consistently lose those. So you should try to figure out how to not fight those battles. So like I was just saying, like I write a lot of code. In the past, I'd started companies where I essentially like was allowed to write as much code as I possibly could. I'm like, oh, I'm going to build this to-do list app and I've got these 35 features that I need to build in order to catch up with the competition. So I can't wait to dig in and do this. And I would just code all the time and miss deadlines and not really do the things that I needed to do. Like, I don't know, find customers for my product. And with Indie Hackers, what I did was avoided this problem altogether. So like sort of like product validation checklist, I was like, I cannot do anything that is code intensive. No matter what kind of code I'm going to be writing for my app, I'm guaranteed to go overboard and write a lot more code and do a lot more things and just get behind. And so I chose Indie Hackers as opposed to these other ideas I had that I thought were pretty good, primarily because it was the least code intensive. And even then, I still ended up like writing my own custom blogging software and doing all sorts of stuff that I didn't need to do. But the point was, like, I kind of predicted, like, I'm going to lose that battle, so I need to make it as easy as I can for me to fight it. So I think in your situation, you should figure out, and this will help if you're sort of deliberately analyzing what your own weaknesses are, sort of figure out, like, what battles do you always lose? How do you make sure you're not fighting those battles as often as possible and you're doing the things, sort of want to constrain yourself to only having time to do the things that you have to do, if possible.
And for your weekly like retrospectives where you're like looking back at like, okay, like what mistakes am I repeatedly making? When you're sort of like thinking of solutions and you want to like push those things through, like how do you keep yourself accountable when you're just doing this by yourself? Or do you put them
it's all random. Like one of my biggest issues is like, I just overbook myself. At the beginning of every week, I'm so optimistic about what I'm going to get done. It's a consistent issue and it has real consequences, which is that I spend the whole week working. There's an entire class of other things that I could be doing that I don't get done in my personal life and with my business. And I don't get finished with anything. Every single day for the longest time, I would go to bed not having finished my list of things I wanted to accomplish. And so like in terms of analyzing that I did that was huge, just to figure out that I did that. And then solutions were just sort of like I don't want to call them like clever hacks, but just like random things that I could do to sort of remind myself that I have this issue. So for example, in my weekly task list, I blocked out Sunday. I said, I'm not allowed to ever schedule anything for Sunday because I always overbook myself. And so if I permanently put a note on Sunday, so every week I see that, hey, you can't put anything on Sunday, then I will probably schedule fewer things every week. And that's sort of helped. And just lots of tricks like that. Like every problem I found has its own solutions. And some of them are like, I'm externally accountable to some people, but some of them are just like, honestly, just reminding myself not to do that thing. And that goes a long way. Some of them I never fix. Like there are issues I've had that I just never got around.
One thing that I'll add to Cortland's point on that weekly review is also celebrating some successes. So things that you're actually proud of. I don't know if you said that, Cortland, but
no, I didn't. That's good though.
We are so hard on ourselves, and we're like, we've got to fix this, and this isn't good enough, and that isn't good enough. And if you're going to do that, like we're going to run that process, make sure you have some milestones and some things that you can celebrate and look back on and say, you know what, I'm really happy that I was able to ship that feature or get this to market or got that piece of customer feedback, because otherwise you just like drill yourself with, it needs to be better, I need to work harder, I need to optimize this, that, and the other. So celebrate those successes as you go along too.
Got it. Okay. I had sort of a second quick question. Let me grab it. Yeah, so another thing that we don't do very well is like formalizing structure for like aggressively getting user feedback. So like it's like really important for us to talk to users. We have, now that the web app is getting more robust, we have users who are using it for different reasons, and it's tricky to get feedback from everyone. Like right now, what we'll just basically do is like we'll launch new features, track who uses it to like a reasonable degree. Like, okay, this person seems to actually be getting value out of this, and then we just like we'll call them and then kind of like write down notes from the calls. But it's kind of haphazard. Doesn't feel very scientific, and it feels like we're probably leaving a lot of value on the table. This feels like this should be something that like is already figured out. So it'd be interesting to know how you guys think about like formalizing user feedback and making sure you're like always talking to users, and like how to actually get like good feedback that will inform future decisions and stuff like that.
Cool.
Go for it, Alex. Okay. This is another thing that I was typically bad at because, again, I just loved writing code. I didn't particularly want to talk to users. I kept hearing this advice, like talk to your users. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I understand the advice, but I wasn't actually doing it. So it was pretty much useless. What I did was like, this is like a perfect example of a hack. I literally just in my welcome email to everyone who joins Indie Hackers for a while, it would just say, hi, I'm Cortland, and I would encourage people to reply, let me know what's going on. At some point I had like a link to like a Zoom call in there so that people would like, or a Calendly link. So people would book calls with me to force myself to talk to people. It got kind of overwhelming at some point, and so I stopped doing it, but I really should go back because it's a thing that I don't do enough. I kind of have a cheat code because I run an online community, and so people are literally talking every day, and me just using my own product counts to some degree as talking to users. Another hack that I've seen people use, this is like sort of like an intrinsic like to your business hack, is have a sales-driven business, or if at all possible, even if you need to reach like a mass market, start with sales. Like try selling people one at a time on what it is that you're building, and in doing sales, like you end up talking to your users and learning a lot about what language resonates with them, what their problems are, et cetera, et cetera. So I think a lot of indie hackers default to marketing, which is just like sometimes a fancy way of saying like, I don't want to have to talk to anybody to work on what I'm doing. But if you sort of like set a goal for yourself, like let's say you're going to talk to 100 people in the next month, or you're going to have one sales call a day or 10 sales calls a week or whatever, those sales calls can sort of kill two birds with one stone by helping you work on a part of your business that you should work on, which is selling, and also like talking to users. So that one might be a little bit harder if you find yourself just like ignoring the sales calls. I don't have any tricks for that, but for me, I just like put it in a situation where like I would have to go into ConvertKit and change my email if I wanted to stop talking to users, and people were just emailing me and I had really no choice.
I love that. I was gonna add on to Cortland's point, which is where was I going with it? Carve out some space on your roadmap for customer-driven features. So by doing that, you actually like there's a bit of a pull, which is like you have to pull input out of your customers to be able to create features that they actually care about. Because what I see a lot with engineers, and this is why I'm laughing so much, because I like haven't spent too much time around engineers in the past couple of months, but they're so smart and they can solve so many problems, but sometimes the way they solve problems is 4 of them go and lock themselves in a room and then come out with this like awesome product, and all the customers are standing around going, how did they come up with that? That doesn't solve my problems. So instead of having that, you can actually just like carve out a slot, whether it's a percentage of what you release or a feature every week or every month or whatever else, that is based on customer feedback, and that will force you to talk to a customer as well. So yeah, that's one other way to pull it in.
And in terms of like actually soliciting feedback, Corlin, you mentioned like having a Calendly link in like an intro email. Because since we're a consumer app and we don't charge users, we have like no sales aspects related at all. So it's just like people come, people go, and so we'll usually just do like lots of like one-off blasts to users who use like new features. But it doesn't feel super scientific, and it's like not great. We'd ideally just like to build some sort of like deal flow of like constant feedback coming in, and we want to build a mechanism to do this. I mean, I guess like we could just put Calendly links like everywhere on the site and be like, come roast us or something.
So when you say it doesn't feel super scientific, like I don't necessarily know that it needs to be that scientific when you're like a 2-person startup. I know Stripe does a lot of customer interviews and like we're launching new features and it's very structured and scientific, but like Stripe is a huge like 1,600 person company where like literally every job you do as a founder, there are 15 people doing some facet of that job. But I think it's okay if it's sort of dirty and messy in this phase. I think more importantly, it's just consistent and you're doing it often. I talked to Daniel Gross, he runs this company called Pioneer, and he was a partner at YC. He talks to something like 15 to 20 users a day, which is like crazy. I've never heard of anyone who does like that much, but that's how highly he prioritizes it. And like, it didn't sound like he had any sort of like super streamlined structure. He was just doing whatever he could every day to talk to users, email them one-on-one, ping them, Slack them, whatever. So I think it really depends. Like, is your issue that you want to be more structured about it and have it like all fit into some sort of nice pipeline, or is your issue that you just can't find a way to reach those users often enough?
I think it's a couple things. Yeah, like I think scientific was probably actually just the wrong word. It was just we just want to just be more consistent about it. Like it just doesn't really happen consistently. Like it basically will send like a big blast when we launch a new feature, but then also the cadence that like large features launch, that's not consistent.
Right.
Like what did Daniel do to like be able to get like this, to like talk to this many people? Because I'd be totally fine as basically copying what he does on like a smaller scale.
Yeah, he didn't break down his exact process, but with Pioneer, it's almost kind of like Indie Hackers in that it's a community of these founders working together. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he's just emailing people. I wouldn't be surprised if he's just jumping in the community and asking questions or setting up calls, et cetera. And I think as the founder, like I'm not sure how much traction your app has, but like as the founder, you have a lot of clout. If people are using something and they like what you're doing, you can email them and they will enjoy it. So Alex might have some more specific tactical advice here, but I don't think, from my perspective, I don't think you need to get super fancy. I think it's just email people, ping them, call them. And if it sounds like the issue is making it a habit, like don't attach it to like a major feature launch. Attach it to it's Thursday, every Thursday I email 10 users, or attach it to every morning. That's what I do. I email a user or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing that I found that was useful, and this is a little bit different to what you're up to, but I would always look, and even though it like hurt my feelings, I would look at reasons that people were signing up and then reasons that people were canceling. Mm-hmm. And that created input for the product roadmap, which was like, what else do we need to, like, how else do we need to position what we're doing? What other features are people looking for that we're not providing? Where are we missing on, service levels and quality, or customer support, like responsiveness, and getting like using, not just like capturing that feedback, but actually feeding it back into something that was actionable. So whether that is, you send out a customer survey, what's one thing that we're doing well? What's one thing that we should improve? And for everything that comes through on a spreadsheet, have an action, whether it's, push that to the roadmap or investigate it further or group it up into what might be a new feature set or something like that. But there's like soliciting the feedback, and then there's actually doing something with it, which to me is a lot more important, because this is what big companies get wrong a lot of the times, is like if you've ever filled out a survey from a company like Comcast, for example.
Right.
Like they get a lot of feedback, man. They get a whole lot of feedback, but I'm not really too sure what they're actually doing with it. So
they just listen to all the things that people hate and they do more of that stuff.
Yeah, they're like, oh, this is really working for us. We're making a ton of money. But the point is like do something with it. That's the point. It doesn't matter like the process or the structure, but actually feeding it into how you're building your product.
Cool.
I see.
So we're going to move on to Runako, who's been waiting patiently. Evan, thanks so much for coming on. Great questions.
Cool. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks a bunch.
Thanks, Evan.
All right. Renako, can you hear us? I can't hear you. Let me see if I can get you in the chat. You might just need to set Zoom to use whatever mic that you're using.
There we go. There we go. Got it.
Cool. How's it going?
Very good. Thanks for having me on. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and joining us from your car, it looks like.
Yes, I am. Actually at a client site. So I have a question. So a little bit about my background. I have a modestly successful SaaS business that's been going on for a number of years. And I'm kind of really intrigued about the productized services businesses. And I've got kind of where I am is like just, I want to say like 15 minutes or a couple of hours before launch on an idea around productizing customer communications, so real-time customer communications. And I guess the questions I have are in the area really of cash flow and kind of cash management for those types of businesses. So as I understand it, you got to pay the staff now, right? And you got to pay, if you want to get 24/7 coverage, you got to pay somebody, at least one person, to be manning the booth at 3 o'clock in the morning. But then you don't necessarily have revenue at the beginning. So I guess my question is, Alex, if you could speak to kind of how you managed that when you were starting WP Curve, what do you see are some of the best approaches to handling that?
Yeah, I learned this lesson the hard way where I was wearing 50 different hats, and I was the guy on live chat, and I was the guy in the help desk, and I was the guy doing marketing and all of this different stuff to get the thing up and running with my co-founder. What I've learned from that, and if you have an established business, you're in a good position to do this, is if you're going to productize some part of your service, you have the opportunity to charge in advance. So you can do a monthly or a quarterly or a biannual or an annual plan. And what that does is it gives you a little bit of buffer and runway to actually be able to fund out, the resources that you need to be able to put in seats to address or be available for certain things. As far as 24/7 goes, depending on what geo you're in, people don't for example, with WP Curve, like 80 to 90% of our customers were actually in the US. So we had a weekend skeleton crew that would keep the lights on in case someone had an issue or a problem. But we could resource that down to 2 people, which meant that in some kind of catastrophic circumstance, both of them would get sick on the weekend, and then there'd be no one there, but then one of us would jump in our phones to be able to support, which I don't think really ever happened. So you get to be, if you're flexible around, or if you have an understanding of your geography of your customers, typically there's nothing significant enough that will make them jump on live chat or email at 3 a.m. It's usually core hours, which for, I think, entrepreneurs is anywhere between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. And then, the resourcing part and the cash flow part, I would look for 70 to 80% coverage on the times that you need, and then set good expectations around anything that you can't necessarily support up front. People are very understanding when you set reasonable expectations. They're not understanding when you don't set their expectations, and they're left waiting for some kind of outcome that you've promised them that you haven't communicated. So does that directionally help with what you're trying to solve for?
Yeah, I think so. And a related question, I know you guys bootstrap WP Curve. If you were doing it again, would you bootstrap again, or would you raise money?
Oh, good question. I would self-fund, and I would take my own money and pour it back into the company. So one of the entrepreneurs that I was spending some time with last week, he's really nailed a model which is very much driven around paid acquisition, and he's just nailed a paid acquisition model. And people ask him about his level of success and where it came from. And he's like, I ruthlessly study what it is I need to understand about paid acquisition, and I've got deep pockets because, he lives in an area with a low cost of living. He's worked and saved and been very diligent with his money and poured all of that back into the company. So my belief is that you get different stresses when you have a company that you've raised money around. And for me, I don't really see a whole lot of value having VCs on board for, maybe the next venture that I jump into. But I do see a lot of value in really reinvesting in and believing in the company that I'm building. And Cortland, you might have might have an opinion on this as a fellow self-funded fellow.
I don't know. I'm the creator of Indie Hackers. I'm heavily biased towards bootstrapping. I was talking to a friend the other day, and it's funny, we're so opposite, but she is very into process over outcomes. For her, she needs to focus on the daily process. Every single day, she needs to love what she's doing. And if she focuses too much on the outcome, then she'll end up doing lots of things she doesn't like doing. And she just hates her life and she quits. And it's just like how she operates. And I'm like the opposite. I need to have like some huge outcome that I'm trying to hit. And I don't mind if like my day-to-day work sometimes sucks, because I'll always be motivated by having this huge outcome. And I like the fact that bootstrapping sort of gives you more control over what it is you want to do and running your business the way that you want to run it. There isn't anyone who's sort of telling you need to go do something this way. And so if you change your mind 6 months into your business, like you're not going to be letting down an investor. You're not going to be pissing off, anyone who's got like a stake in your business. You're going to really just be up to you. And so that's sort of my bent. I think whichever one you choose, you should make different decisions on how you run that company, because you're going to have a different goal. And so for me, I've run companies in the past that were funded by investors, and like the agreements that I kind of had with my investors is sort of like, I'm going to try to get to this level, right? And that meant doing very different things. That meant having a different business model, targeting different customer segments. That meant sometimes not doing the easy win because I'm going for this bigger, harder thing. And then with the Indie Hackers, it was sort of just doing what I liked to do for the most part, but it also meant that like I couldn't incur these huge costs because I wasn't going to raise much money, et cetera. And so I had to always sort of keep the ship running lean, which I enjoyed doing. It was kind of fun for me to have that constraint. And I think honestly, I built a better product because of it. Having some constraints for me is better. Even at Stripe now, I think it's harder for me to sort of focus and build the right things because I have enough funding and not necessarily like any revenue pressure, that the universe of things that I can choose is just bigger. And it's, I think, surprisingly kind of a harder problem for me specifically. So I think it really comes down to you. Like, what do you want to do? What are your strengths and weaknesses? What can you look back on 5 years from now and be happy that you did?
Thank you. So you talked a little bit about outcomes. And one of the things that I've done some research on, Alex, I haven't been able to find anything good, but like if you can just characterize the valuations, like if you're looking to kind of sell a productized services business, does that look more like, if you're going to sell it, is it more like a consulting business, or does it look more like a SaaS business, or kind of what does that look like? What does that process look like for a productized services business?
Yeah, sure. So it's funny because you can look at comps and you can look at like, I don't know, any kind of service business that might give you like a 0.25 to a 1 times multiple for revenue. Mm-hmm. That's a comp for like a recruiting business or a consulting business or something like that. The interesting part is like I've seen productized services that run at like a 60 or a 70% margin. So there are businesses out there that like are spinning off a ton of cash and are very scalable. And there's ways to scale like a productized service where you don't have like a linear, a linear scaling of people alongside it, which is nice because you start to get this like little, logarithmic curve thing that happens. It depends on the acquirer. Like when I went out to market to look at and this is like way back, this is 2016, I think like business brokers would typically look at paying anywhere from like 0.75 to 1.25 on annual recurring revenue. Now, if you look on the broking sites, it can be anywhere from like 1.5 out to like 3x, depending on how fast the business is growing, and what the opportunity set is. And then, if you put yourself in a position where a company comes along that has a huge customer base and they go, hey, we like what you're doing and we want to bolt it onto our company and then like scale it by 10 or 100x, then you're talking a little bit more of a strategic opportunity, which gives you a higher multiple yet again. So I think to like get clear on like what the multiple range can be, depending on what the buyer wants, it can be anywhere from like 0.25 annual revenue to, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7, depending on the space, the technology. And what I'm seeing a lot today is like tech-enabled services as well. So, I think it's tech-enabled services, which is basically like there's a platform that has a level of kind of like white glove to it. So you start out with, I would say, a service that you're fulfilling on behalf of the customer, and then you figure out a way to like stack that into a software solution. So like one inside-out version of that is when Zenefits was kind of coming through and doing big things. What they actually had, they did this the other way, where they had like a button that you would push to submit a form or whatever else. And all of that stuff would get like manually handled in the back end by a bunch of, folks that were offshore or, just filling out paperwork and everything else, because there was literally like no integration, no paperwork, nothing happening. So, but that company commanded a massive, massive valuation because of the opportunity set and because of how big the market could be and what was in front of them. And they had an amazing sales process. So to give you that spectrum, it can be anywhere from 0.25 out to 5, 6, 7x, depending on the space that you're in.
Okay, and you mentioned that the technology. So I kind of suffer from the same problem that Cortland mentioned earlier. Like I write too much code, which is one of the reasons that this business is appealing. But when you guys were building WP Curve, you obviously had to build some internal systems and processes, and probably some custom software to kind of support those processes. Could you talk a little bit about that? Like, how did you guys think about that while you were doing it? What kind of bounds or limits did you place on it?
Yeah, I didn't have the curse, or maybe it's a gift of being an engineer. And sometimes I wish I had that curse or gift, because I love to talk to customers. I could talk to customers all day, every day, but it means I get no work done. So the way that I looked at it was that we would like work with systems and tools and processes until they broke. So when we started WP Curve, it was a Gmail inbox that pushed pushed some data to a Trello card, which then would be manually moved around for a developer to work on. And when they were finished working on what they'd worked on, there would be a note that went into Google Docs, and then we'd send an email to notify the customer that the task was complete. And so through scaling out to working with GoDaddy, at GoDaddy, I had to build all sorts of enterprise systems and plumbing and a customer-facing dashboard and all of that good stuff, but only because the customer base was so big that we basically needed like these pipelines coming through with extremely clear customer requirements. All the questions that a customer would have to answer would need to be front-loaded. The quality inbound needed to be really good and clear, because at that scale and volume, it just wouldn't work. So I looked at, with that, it was a different problem set to solve, and that would probably be where most engineers would go, which is to like create this like really nice solution that has all of these bells and whistles, but wasn't necessarily needed. The other things that were important were making sure that for at least our service levels is prioritization of tickets. So that was by customer type and also by urgency of problem, which is just some basic like score-based routing. And what else was important? Yeah, security. So customer credentials and making sure that they're locked down and there's no risk that someone like our password database would be leaked and then all of our customers would get hacked, because that would be a terrible, terrible scenario for everyone. But these are all things that as we started to grow and scale, like didn't really matter at like a couple, like 50 customers or 100 customers, but when you get up into the hundreds or the thousands of customers, like having a really robust process and solution for some of these problems is key. And that means like you kind of let stuff break. And then once it breaks, you go, oh, okay, there's some urgency to fix that.
And those initial customers, that initial 50 or 100, do you remember what was the most effective way to get those on board?
Effective is a funny word. It wasn't the most efficient way, but I remember like I would get on live chat and sell customers. So I would be like chatting with customers, talking to them about their problems, kind of being the FAQ. And then I'll push all of the stuff that came through the chats into the FAQ or into the canned emails that we'd send customers in response. And like all of the data I was gathering like went downstream to somewhere or something. And because I was so close to it, I could also see, okay, this system or this like Google Docs thing is going to break once we get past like 50 or 60 customers, just because of naming conventions, or like what if a customer has 2 sites or they have 3 sites or they like change their site or something like that. So then you have to start forcing like, okay, we've got to do some of this stuff programmatically. But yeah, I would start with manual everything and then look at what the biggest pain points are that come up. And customers again are understanding with this stuff. If you manage their expectations and say, guys, we're kind of building this as we go to make sure that it like wraps around and gives you a good experience, they're typically pretty understanding.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Alex. Appreciate it.
Hey, you're welcome, man.
Thanks for coming on. We are going to move on to our last founder of the day. Mike, I've added you in here. Mike, if you can hear us, let us know you're live. I don't see a video for you, I just see a name.
The ghost of Mike Walker?
The ghost of Mike Walker. There we go.
There he is.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going good. I'm getting so much information by being the last speaker. It's really great. Half my questions already answered, so maybe we can pass this on. Yeah. Yeah, so honestly, thanks for taking the time to chat. This office hours stuff is amazing. It's a really great idea. I was actually really interested in this because I am maybe against some people's advice, working on two businesses at the same time while also doing contracting work. It's kind of all I'm doing right now, as you can imagine. So what I want to do, but they're all kind of synergistic in a way. So what I want to do is kind of feel out a few things from you. Particularly one of the items, one of the businesses is very similar to WP Curve. So really, maybe the fun question to ask is, would you build WP Curve again today? No, Alex?
Would I build it again today?
Would you build it again today? I mean, you were asked earlier if you would bootstrap it or not, but I wonder in the current environment and how things are, like the WordPress maintenance, and it's getting pretty busy. Would you build that business again today?
Yeah, absolutely. Like whether I'm interested in that space is another. Like I'm not. That's not really my jam. I'm more of like an entrepreneur / founder guy. So if I was, I don't.
Did Alex freeze for you, Mike?
Yeah.
Alex, you're frozen in time. Frozen mid-thought.
I mean, it's an interesting face for sure.
Well, let me ask you questions while Alex is frozen. We'll see if we can get it back in here. Why are you interested in building WP Curve today?
You know, I'm not necessarily interested in building WP Curve. So let me, you know what? I didn't do my little intro, so let me talk about that a little bit. I'm a developer. I've been doing development for, I think I say everywhere over 12 years, and I feel like it's been longer than that. I've been working with agencies in the last 10, and as a developer, and I've kind of progressed through that. And I've noticed that there's, agency developers have different issues than a developer who is a freelancer or developer who builds products. And I feel like a lot of the issues that, we talk a lot about what it's like to freelance or what it's like to build products, but we don't talk a lot about what it's like to be a developer at a freelance agency or, work in the digital agency space. So I want to help people understand the digital agency space. And specifically, I want to help people who are working or, people who are going through focusing specifically on code boot camps right now and helping those people go from their boot camp into agency. And I'm focusing on that with one business called The Agency Dev. And that's kind of a blog and a little online brand or a Twitter brand, what have you. Still working on exactly what that looks like, but right now it's an email newsletter, a curated newsletter for jobs for agency jobs for people who are graduating boot camps. I'm
Cool.
Specifically in Vancouver, and I'm focusing on the Vancouver, BC boot camps for the localized,
Cool.
Geographically local people.
Alex, did you catch any of that? He's building basically, or he's got a newsletter to help developers who are in boot camps sort of transition into jobs working at agencies. I don't know if Alex. Okay, you're back. Your picture now.
I'm back.
Video.
Yeah, I'm on LTE, and I might like drop out if I don't ration my bandwidth here. I don't know if I got a chance to answer the first question, which is around like, would I build it again or would I jump back into that space?
Yeah, that's what you got at the beginning of that answer.
I was trying to make it a cliffhanger. Actually, it was just my Wi-Fi. But so the answer to that question is I would, but I'm not super passionate about WordPress. Like I never was really that passionate about WordPress. I was passionate about proving that I could do a startup. And that was like a proof thing for me rather than a particular business model or a space or anything else. I wanted to build a product, build a team, and make it really successful. And that was the thing that I was looking to fulfill. So I was agnostic of like what it was, what type of app it was, what type of product it was. But I'd say that if anyone is thinking about getting into that space, the compound annual growth rate of WordPress is huge. A few years ago, it was powering like 20% of the web. Now it's powering 30% of the web. The web is ever expanding. So there's like opportunities abound within that space. And same thing applies to Salesforce. Like Salesforce has a similar kind of growth rate as far as, you know, market penetration. So if there's a market that you can see that's growing significantly, there's always going to be space for people to come in and serve those customers and solve their problems.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, so I think that's great to hear. Honestly, I was afraid I was going to get a different answer, so I like to hear that. Yeah, so I was talking a little bit about. So really, what I'm trying to do is help agencies, digital agencies, on one end of the spectrum, like kind of on two ends of a project, because agencies always think about projects, but like helping them get developers into projects, as well as helping them manage their projects, like kind of like projects aftercare, for lack of a better term, or maintain and SEO and content strategy and things, marketing and all those things. So I feel like I'm trying to figure out where I really need to focus my efforts for digital agencies. And I feel like the one that strikes me the most is not necessarily the maintenance, but is the thing I was talking about just as you rejoined, was my little business called the Agency Dev, where I'm trying to get bootcamp graduates, specifically in Vancouver, jobs with digital agencies. And I'm wondering if really kind of pursuing these two types of businesses makes a lot of sense, or because there's a bit of a, like, they have a common client, I guess, but they're kind of separate in their, they're very separate in their way in the business itself. Is it a bad idea for me to pursue these two things kind of at the same time, or, like, what are your thoughts there?
There are no bad ideas, so there's no good or bad. I think the way that I would look at it is a couple of things. Is the type of business that you want to build, like, do you want with the placement style of business, you will get paid a lot, a few times, maybe a year. With a like aftercare business, you'll get paid a lot of times of the year. So they're completely different models. Neither one is good or bad, but it really depends on like where you want to spend your time. Personally, I'm a huge fan of recurring revenue. And if there's a way that you can build a business that gives you recurring revenue that helps you not have to think about, where the next paycheck is coming from or where the next contract is coming from, that's a wonderful thing. So I am a massive proponent of that. And I'm also thinking about like the volume of folks that come out of the boot camps, and like what placement opportunities are actually available to them. So for example, are the agencies that are in the Vancouver area growing at such a rate where you would have a graduate class of 10 or 15 or 100 bootcamp folks come through and then be able to land them and find them, roles in these agencies because there's a big enough market for it. I don't know the answer to that question. That's a question that I'd be trying to figure out an answer to. And then also understanding the revenue model. So do you get paid, a commission, or do you get paid a trail, or like, what does that look like? Because I'm assuming these folks are entry level devs, and maybe, I don't know how big the margin would be on that business versus something like an aftercare business, which is once you've signed a client on and they're a good client, then you'll be able to retain them for a number of years and, just keep doing good work and you've got the money coming in. So that all depends on your personal situation, but those are the differences in models that I think about.
Okay, and just to provide a little bit of clarity, I mean, and again, this, I might be way off here, but I'm in the planning stages of all of this. Though I've been following, like, working for agencies, you get to experience kind of little snapshots of how other businesses are doing when we get engaged to help build, like, a microsite or e-commerce platform or a Shopify shop or something like that. We get to experience all this stuff. So this is kind of where my insight's coming from here. But honestly, the placement is more almost, from my perspective, I was thinking about it more of a almost like content marketing, trying to get people into a funnel trying to get agencies interested in what I'm offering and making myself look like a bit of a leader, a thought leader. Let me preface that with air quotes. But like, the type of person who you can go to that has development power behind them. But so like kind of, and because I really like being a solutions provider, I really like solving problems. I do a lot of e-commerce build, and like, how do we integrate, this ERP system with this platform and this thing, and like, how do we fit all these Legos together? I love that, and that's really kind of what I'm trying to figure out here. So yeah, I guess really what I'm trying to do is build this like base of like, hey, I'm helping people get jobs, and I look like this very smart person, but I also provide this other business that will help your business grow, help maintain your business. So like, you can focus on building the big cool thing, and I'll help help refer talent, as well as help provide maintenance and support afterwards.
Yes. Yeah. So I can share some things with you, at least in my experience with trying to sell to agencies. I was convinced that agencies would be an ideal customer for WP Curve. In the first 3 months, I would have done like dozens, if not hundreds of phone calls with different folks in the agency space to try and sell them a product which would be, an aftercare kind of support solution. What I found was the trust gap was too great, partly because we were brand new, partly because they didn't want to hand over any of their client information to us, and partly because there was concerns around quality as to whether we would do a good enough job, and if we did a poor job, that would impact their relationship with their client and therefore lead to less business in the future. So there was a huge trust gap to kind of get over there. If you already have existing agencies that you have relationships with, I would be talking to the owner or the founder and understanding like, what would this relationship look like? Because like what you're talking about is providing some level of support. Like you're kind of like a meta agency in some sense, which is like you'll take overflow work on support side. You'll have your own, I don't know, either folks that you can refer in. So yeah, I would really be talking to agency to understand if it's a model that they would actually support, and like what it would what it would actually mean to them. Because back when I was trying to do it, I had I kind of got my fingers burned, and I wrote a blog post about it, which is talks about, if you just search like WP Curve white label failure, I talk about some of the challenges that I had in that. And just because I couldn't get it to work doesn't mean it won't work. Like that was just my experience, but I would say like get in and ask those questions and say, okay, I've got these two things I'm working on. Which would be more useful to you? Like what would you actually get value out of? And if I had candidates coming through every 6 months, like how reasonable would it be for you to want to, get vetted candidates that are good at what they do to jump in and join your team? Because I'm assuming that you'd have to have a growing team to be wanting to push people through at that clip.
Yeah, I think without really living in Vancouver specifically, it's difficult. Like there are very specific factors that factor into what, like it's very difficult to find good talent in the city. If you have an agency in the city, you're constantly on the hunt for the proper talent. There's a lot of people switching from other industries into development because there's a dearth of good developers, or any developers really. Especially with the big names moving into the city to snatch up talent. So agencies are having a rough time. I know some of my clients have lost some good people to big names. So they need to fill those gaps. And unfortunately, bootcamp graduates probably won't fill the gaps, but there's a lot of work that we can start shifting. So anyhow, I feel like there's some interesting stuff there to be had. But I think I'm hearing a lot there to. Chat with my customers, chat with my the owners of the agencies who I'm working with already, and I've got some of their feedback, but I need to have a deeper conversation rather than a coffee chat around the water cooler or whatever.
Yeah, and have some structure around it. Like ask some of the direct questions. Like if I offered this at this price point, would that be something that's interesting to you? Okay, if not, why not? Like what else could we offer? Or does it completely miss the mark? And, you're not going to hurt my feelings by being honest with me. Just let me know.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I have a couple more questions here, if that's okay. I've written so many notes, it's hard to find them all, but.
I've got time for one more question.
One more question. All right.
Fine. Those are your best.
Best one. You know what? I'm really interested in I've been doing a lot of reading about mental models and decision making. And I wonder if you are the type of person who like researches mental models and uses them to decide to make decisions for your business, or are you just kind of a trust your gut kind of guy?
Oh man, I used to be the mental model master. I was all about Charlie Munger and his mental models, and
Yeah.
I know there's a big blog post. I think it's like Eric Jorgensen or one of those guys wrote an awesome post about mental models. Lately, I've just been following my heart. So if I was following like my mental model brain, I would be jumping right back in to build another business and go and get it acquired and all that kind of stuff. But right now, what I'm doing is getting to work with entrepreneurs who are building really cool products and helping them and kind of seeing where things take me, which is like the I don't know, in some level, the anti-mental model. But it's bearing fruit because I get to hang out with guys like you and chat and have fun and feel like I'm not doing any work, and I'm kind of not, but getting paid for it in some way, shape or form. So I'm fortunate to be in that position, but it wouldn't have served me well, a couple of years ago when I was actually building the business. So yeah, to answer your question, I see a ton of value in mental models. Charlie Munger has got some wonderful mental models. I think one of the ones that he talks about is inversion, and I couldn't speak to it with any level of I don't know, abstraction, but it's really useful. Maybe Cortland can weigh in on that one.
Yeah, I'm also a huge Charlie Munger fan. I think he's extremely wise, and I think about mental models all the time. A lot of the basic ones that he talks about, I think you can somewhat internalize. Like, I think when I was younger, first reading him, I didn't really quite believe in the power of incentives or the power of like thinking about systems as sort of changing behavior by shaping systems rather than like, trying to talk to an individual person. And so I think it's been exceptionally powerful. Really simple stuff like checklists. He talks about these tools or having like some sort of lattice work to sort of hang your theories on so you can easily remember them. Checklists are huge for me. I just forget stuff. I make the same mistakes over and over again. I was talking about this earlier on, and sometimes make the mistakes over and over again because I simply haven't written them down and created a process for like going through them one by one. And so that's ridiculously simple, but I find it helps. If I'm building a new feature, I have like sort of a quick checklist of like, what mistakes do I make, building features? What things do I do well? How do I emphasize those things and avoid the mistakes? So I think checklists are underrated. I like having sort of visual frameworks for, I guess, picturing different things. And so this guy, Brian Balfour, he was the head of growth at, I believe, HubSpot. And he has this model he calls the 4 fits. And so usually founders talk about product market fit, but he's actually like, well, you've got product market fit, but you've also got these other 2 quadrants, which is pricing and distribution channels. And so your distribution channel needs to fit your market that you're targeting, right? But the people you target hang out on the channels that you particularly want to advertise on or promote your product on or sell through. And does your pricing model, is it high enough that the unit economics work out that you can afford to even target these distribution channels? If your distribution channel is sales, like you need to have a high enough pricing model. And if your pricing model, how does that fit with your product, et cetera? And so he sort of has these 4 different fits. And I find just like having a visual representation of these quadrants makes it way easier for me to evaluate a business idea or even a product idea that I'm thinking of because there's so much information packed in like just such a small visual image of these 4 different quadrants. And so whenever possible, I try to like come up with like some sort of visual model of different things. Another one I like is Rob Walling calls it the stair step approach to startups. I call it sort of the climbing wall, where ultimately if you have some ambitious goal, it helps to take one small step at a time. And that step will sort of boost your height on the wall and make it easier to reach the next step. And a lot of people, I think, get stuck trying to do something very advanced. I often do this, especially as a developer. I'm going to build a super advanced thing, et cetera, et cetera. But when I remind myself of this sort of analogy, I tend to stick to that model a little bit better and bite off smaller chunks and try to think rationally about how this chunk can get me to the next level, and sort of I can build on those advantages to make the next jump easier and have these smaller wins rather than having to have this one huge win. So I do think about mental models, and I think it's helpful as a founder.
Brian Balfour is like the Charlie Munger of marketing mental models. I think he's got some really good stuff. Really, really good stuff.
I will be looking into him. Thank you.
All right, Mike. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure helping you out.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is great, and I'll be around for these in the future. This is awesome. Thanks a lot.
Cool. All right, Alex. Well, that is it. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your expertise and your advice with all of these founders who are building real businesses. Can you tell the audience a little bit about what you're up to yourself, where they can find you online, how they can reach you, etc.
Yeah, so my website is productize.co, which is productize.co, or ZE, as you say in the States. If anyone watches this and they're stuck on an issue or a problem or something that they're dealing with in their business, they can email me at alex@productize.co. All I do all day is talk to CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, and help them basically get unstuck. I'm kind of like a sounding board. So yeah, if you've got a problem, you've got an issue, happy to help out. And I think you'll find me getting a bit more involved in the Indie Hackers Forum as well. You've got some really cool people here, and it's
Cool.
It's cool to see what you built, man. A great group of people.
I'm jealous of your job, and it sounds like my dream job. Anyway, thanks, Alex. So
You're
much.
kind of doing it, man. You're kind of doing it.
Kind of doing it, kind of not, but it's been great.
Yeah.
Later, Alex.